I've gotten watching it one time.
You're on.
1,000.
It was just. He says it was like 1,030. My metrics say.
Oh, we're on.
I saw it
no
at
problem.
1,000 before.
We're gloating anyway, so it's good that you're all here. Welcome back. I'm Kyle Curtis. That man. This has to be the way that it is now. I guess he's permanently to my left, right?
No, it's not going to be permanent. I think it changes all the time.
Well, I hear that's not a good thing.
It's not a good thing according to some people, but we like to mix it up a little bit, keep you on your toes.
Anyways, welcome. We are going to have a fantastic discussion with two very bright, smart people. I hope that they don't prove me wrong. Just kidding. One of them you know quite well. He's been on our channel several times before. That man is Skylar Fiction, who has here recently received a lot of media attention. So it's nice to have a celeb in the house, Skylar.
Please. Well, I appreciate the love. I'm glad to be here, man. One of my favorite shows. So this is fantastic.
Well, thank you. And joining us for the first time is a gentleman that I actually had a conversation with in Reformed Christian Apologists Hangout a couple of weeks ago, and found him to be quite interesting and wanted to hear more of his views on things. So, Soli Deo Gloria, welcome, sir.
Thank you guys for having me.
Absolutely. Let me get settled and tell you guys what we've got coming up for the next couple of days, and then Steve, did you say that you had something that you wanted to banter about before we started?
No, I think it's already been resolved. If anybody wants to go watch the other video, go watch the other video.
Oh yeah. Okay, so we will. We had some scheduling issues with tomorrow's episode. If anything else, we will still be on at 8 p.m. Eastern. We'll probably do debate roulette for that, unless our second plan doesn't pan out. But join us nonetheless at 8 p.m. on Monday. Tuesday, Alex Botton's book is near completion, and it's a very interesting concept. He's going back and telling pieces about his life from his inner self, which is usually the unfiltered version, the kind that says things to friends that you don't actually say out loud, but you think in your head. And so he has wrote kind of like an autobiography from that point of view. And it has some interesting repercussions for that, because people that you grew up with, that you're around, actually read and know what you think about them. And so we're going to kind of dive into that. But Alex Botton, if you don't know who that is, he used to have a very successful podcast called Fundamentally Flawed a couple years ago. And it's good to have him back in the community. So we welcome him on Tuesday. Wednesday is the day, unfortunately, that I turned 32. I know I'm just as upset about it as you all are. For my 31st birthday, Steve, I spent it in the bed with ice cream and Jennifer Aniston and rom-coms. I refused to get out. After my 20s, it was over.
You got to age gracefully, man. I'm not even worried about it. I'm pushing 50. I'll be 50 in 2 years, and you know what? I'm good to go on it. I'm good to go. I've come to terms with it, man.
Science better find that fountain of youth. That's all I'm saying.
As long as you don't look like Skylar, you'll be okay. Don't worry.
Oh, Skylar, don't let Gandalf get away with that.
First of all, you would only be so lucky to look at me like me. But Kyle's got plenty of sexiness going on already. So
I don't want to get away from you two.
Let's just be
plus
honest.
that hat would cover his good hair. I mean, Kyle's got some good looking hair.
That's very true.
Now this sounds like a fantastic topic to.
Yeah, forget the discussion. Let's just talk about Kyle's
switch
hair.
out for I can't. No, I can't.
He can. He can and has. Don't think that he hasn't.
So Wednesday, we're going to do kind of a fun stream. We're in the program that we use called Zoom. We're allowed to have up to 100 people on the call. We pushed up to 15 last Friday. And so to all of our patrons, if you're a patron of the show, you get the link to come on for the birthday stream. We're going to have a lot of content creators in the community stopping by, and we're going to be playing NonSequitur Jeopardy, where all the questions have to do with past episodes, things to do with me and Steve, if you pick up on, if you've been watching us for a while. So it'll be a good time. It'll be just a party while I sit in the corner and cry while you all play Jeopardy.
I need ice cream.
Yeah. So instead of Jennifer Aniston, I'm replacing her with you. So no pressure, but you better be good. And then on Thursday, Mr. Atheist will be back with us to discuss whether or not voting should be mandatory. And that's going to be with Shannon Q and Jamie Sislow as well. So that'll be a lot of fun. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to the epitome of introductions, Mr. McRae.
Well, thank you. Wow, I wasn't expecting that. I feel special.
Did you catch
and I'm really like dressed down today. Kyle's all dressed up today because he had his this concession speech, his Nixon speech, and I didn't feel like getting dressed up today because it wasn't that important to go address that other person who I'm not going to talk about in this video. But anyways, Soli, I'm not too familiar who you are, but I want to welcome you to the NonSequitur Show. Skylar, yeah, I know you very well. So welcome back to the show. You guys are going to be having a discussion tonight, I believe, on God being evil or not, I believe is the topic, right? Correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's a prepared format. So again, we're just going to have one of those organic types of conversations. But I will say, why don't you guys take a time to introduce yourselves, your channel, and your positions, and then we'll just dive into it. And then after that, we'll do the Q&A and kind of talk about your discussion. So Soli, you're new to the NonSequitur Show, so why don't you go ahead and tell us about yourself and your channel and your positions?
Sure. I really don't care if people go to my channel or not. I don't know. Maybe it was predestined for them to just stumble upon that sort of a thing. But I do have a little YouTube channel that I used to also run called One Way Apologetics.
Oh,
and, I am that same person. So
you're One Way Apologetics.
Yeah.
I had no idea. Okay.
I have a good O or a bad O?
All cards on the table. I've known One Way for a very long time, actually. Okay. Not a bad way. I mean, he's cool.
Hopefully it's a good way.
Yeah. No, we've always gone along. I just didn't know that was your other name.
You know, Steve would tell you if it wasn't. That's the one thing about him. He's,
he would.
He's annoyingly honest.
I am brutally honest.
No, annoyingly honest.
Yeah. So basically, I'm a Reformed Christian. I hold to covenantal theology, and I take an accommodationist approach to Scripture. So when I see something, rather than a concordist would, where they try to read Genesis 1 outside of its context, I wouldn't do that. I think that's the wrong way to interpret Scripture. So a lot of that will show a little bit tonight, I think.
Okay. Skylar, what about you?
Hey, what's up, everybody? I'm Skylar Fiction. I got a YouTube channel. Just Google it or go to YouTube, type Skylar Fiction. I mostly host what we call as conversations on my channel. A lot of them tend to be debates with theists, Christians of all varieties, Calvinists, non-Calvinists. I don't think I've debated any Muslims yet, but I'm always happy to have people on to have conversations. It's what I love to do. SkylarFictionShow@gmail.com. You ever want to come on? Other than that, this is a hobby. This is what I like to do for fun. I love YouTube. If you love D-Lo the Pilot Man, he'll be back on my channel soon. So,
shit!
Oh yeah, can't miss the pilot.
We'll have him. I'm thankful to be on here to be able to have this discussion, this conversation. So I look forward to showing that God's evil.
Okay. So do you want to actually let Skylar kind of jump into it about why he believes God is evil? Because I think obviously that would be the dissenting position in this case. I think
Soli was going to go first.
Yeah, let's Soli go first. He's good.
Let's Soli go first. Okay, Soli, you want to go first and kind of give us your position on it, and then.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So the way that I think about this, when we're trying to look for God's attributes in Scripture, it's not as simple as looking at cultural context and then applying those today. The same thing with a flat earth, in Genesis 1 or whatever. And so what I would try to look for is the principles behind those things that would apply today, that could apply universally, the same way any other ethicist would. But a couple of key things would be that I would make a distinction between God's essential nature and his covenantal nature. That is before creation. This would be essentialism, basically. Sort of like just as spheres are always round, like that's one necessary feature of a sphere, but the color on the sphere could differ. So I would say that there are certain attributes that are like the color on that sphere, and I would put those into the covenantal category. And the essential nature features or attributes I would put that we would ground God's moral character into an essentialist perspective, like before creation, that's what God, those are God's attributes that he's always had. And so I make that sort of a distinction. Does that make sense so far? And then the other thing is that I would say God was eternally good, the ground of all good, love and love, prior to creation, until he entered covenant, where he took upon himself more properties, these covenantal properties, these non-essential properties, like the color in a sphere. And so since he took upon himself the covenantal property, and he then condescends and accommodates us to move humanity in a redemptive direction. So you see a cyclical pattern of creation, redemption, fall throughout the Old Testament, working its way towards a redemptive purpose. And then the only other thing that I would point out is that just as like a story writer, like J.R. Tolkien can write a novel with many necessary wicked elements in his created world, that he himself may morally disapprove of those some of those actions in order to finish the story for a greater good. But in the same way that this works, then we wouldn't hold J.R. Tolkien morally accountable or call him evil, right? Simply because he made a world with characters that commit evil acts. So that's sort of my position just laid out. So I grant the whole absolute predestination theme. Sorry, let me close my dog. Thanks, guys. Sorry.
That's okay. There's an ongoing joke that in every debate that we have, a dog barks. Seriously, is that not true, Steve?
From day one.
Yeah, and sometimes the dogs make better arguments than the people who are actually debating,
especially the woman ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a little puppy, and she's surrogating my older puppy surrogating the puppy. So
awesome. Okay, so were you finished with your opening?
Yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Skylar, and you guys can now kind of talk back and forth, I guess, and however you want to go about it.
Sure, and just to kind of say a couple opening things here. The first thing we need to point out is obviously I don't believe in God of the Bible. Okay, which is what we're kind of talking about here, the Christian Yahweh from the Old Testament and Jesus from the New Testament. So I don't believe in them, all right? So when I'm talking about evil, right, and this is another word which I need to point out is subjective, right? Because, we may all have different definitions of evil when we use that word, okay? Now, the Christian is most likely going to have a very different definition of evil. They're going to use it in a way that evil actually exists most of the time. So what we have to get started with first, right? So let me just give you a quick Google definition of evil: profoundly immoral or malevolent. Another would be profoundly moral wickedness, depravity, especially with regard to a supernatural force. So how is God described in the Bible? And when I give you some of these examples, I want you to think, as the listener, does this sound evil to you? So you have a God, if you're a Calvinist, who believes in predestination, which means before you're even basically born, you are destined to go to hell. And you will not be offered God's grace, because you have to be offered grace before you can use your, depends on how you look at it. If there's some form of free will where you can accept that grace and say, yes, I want salvation. I accept Jesus Christ. If you don't believe in free will, well, then basically God will just, in some sense, force you to believe in him. So first step, a God who basically decides before you even commit one action that you will be destined for eternal suffering and torture. Second, this God of the Bible does, in my opinion, evil things, like, for instance, he knows the whole Garden of Eden story. He knows what's going to happen if he puts Adam and Eve in this garden. He knows that if he puts the tree of knowledge of good and evil, they'll eat from it. But he chooses to do so anyways. He knows that if he allows the serpent to wander around in this garden, that the serpent will tempt him. He does so anyways. And then after all that, basically what happens is you have now all these repercussions that come. So now that Adam and Eve disobeyed God, sin came in the world. People are born with a sinful nature. And this sinful nature, by simply being born with it, destines you to hell unless God chooses to have favor with you and offer you some type of salvation. Now, he didn't have to do it that way. God could have done it any way he absolutely chose to. He chose to make it to where a sinful nature and the rest of mankind would be damned for all eternity. On top of that, after he does all that, he creates all these sicknesses and diseases that are in the world because of this. Now, Christians may have different positions on why disease is here, but the bottom line is without God, they wouldn't exist. Every disease that cripples children, causes human beings to suffer, live miserable lives, is caused by God, this supposed all-loving God that cares about us. But I guess, and I'm not going to speak necessarily for Soli because I don't know all his beliefs as a Calvinist yet, but Calvinists in general, they do believe that God hates people. Okay, so not only does he make all diseases that cause so much human suffering, and not just to the people suffering from them, the poor loved ones around those people who have to watch their family members live in extreme pain, live miserable lives, and die early most of the time. Those people have to go through that. Then on top of all that, I'll say a couple more things real quick. God condones slavery in the Bible for some strange reason to kind of work within the culture. Bans pork, bans men with crushed testicles from entering the tabernacle, but slavery, totally cool. You can own child slaves, treat them with rigor, keep them permanently for life. Later on in scripture, just decides to fuck with Job. Not Job. Well, he does fuck with Job, but he more fucks with Abraham. Tells him he's going to have to sacrifice his own son. Plays a weird, sadistic mental game with him. Makes him go to a mountaintop. And right before he's about to kill his son, tells him to stop. There's lots of things throughout scripture that I'm sure will come out through this debate. But all of these things I've described, I just asked you, the audience, would you view this as evil? If another human being had the power of God, right, and was able to force people into these situations or did these kind of things to people, would you call that evil? I would bet you would. And the only thing you're going to be able to hear here, what I would put money on, is an argument to just basically define God as good and that no matter what God does, it's righteous and holy. Therefore, he can't sin. It can't, by definition, be bad. But when we look at it through our human lenses and the world around us, they don't match up. I think I'll leave it there.
Okay, Soli?
Yeah, thank you for the fine points to consider, Skylar. So you said a few things there. You were talking about the definition of evil. My point wouldn't matter how we define evil technically, since in the Christian world we would make a distinction between the creator and the creature, and God's ways are not our ways. At least from my perspective, because there's this storyline with the author break, these words have analogical relations. That means that they don't have a full one-to-one correspondence. And so that there's a semantic range of words or meanings, many different literal meanings, and we have to examine all these in the context if we're looking at scripture anyway. And when we speak and we use equivocal terms like love and evil, which tend to not be univocal in nature, like it's the difference between me saying, when I'm talking about analogical reasoning or analogical description, it would be like me saying, I went to the sea of Manhattan, or I saw a book, right? That word is sort of equivocal, or I belong to the sea, or something of that sort. But yeah, from my perspective, I think a predestinarian model actually guarantees responsibility. because the opposite would be indeterminism, which would render everybody's thoughts and decisions as chance. And I'm actually not committed to any particular free will model at the moment, but Calvinism does affirm some form of compatibilism. Now, you also said that God could have done it another way. And I would submit that if he's entered into a covenant with these people, then he's bound himself to his own word, just as your spouse would, or anybody else, in a marital, like, sort of relationship. Additionally, God could have, in fact, done it another way, and there might be a morally sufficient reason that we don't know about or can't know. And in fact, it's my position in Genesis 1-3, because of their eating of the tree of knowledge of good and of evil, that we actually can't know that. They've fallen into the noetic effects of sin. Now, you mentioned some other verses. I think something about Job suffering, right?
Well, yeah, I was going to mention Job, but really my goal was to talk about Abraham and what he does to him and his son.
Yeah. So before, okay, this is interesting. If you read the story throughout the various ways it's portrayed, or various aspects are given, basically it was God showing Abraham how to do a proper sacrifice for the covenant system that he had established with Abraham. And then on the slavery issue,
well, can we go that point by point before we jump to the other one? I mean, if you want to finish, you can go ahead. But
which point?
Like the point you just made about, like, he was showing you about his
for example, I think it's in Genesis 22. We could look at it. Yeah. When he leaves and goes away from the donkey, he actually says that the boy and himself are going to come back. They're going to go up in their worship and they're going to come back.
Well, because he has faith that God won't allow.
Because he has faith won't allow that sort of a thing. So then you have to posit, another situation. What could that mean? And my understanding would be that he's trying to show Abraham the correct way to sacrifice, because he's a covenant God.
By using his son the son wouldn't know that.
No, the son would be the means to the ram, basically.
So God, in order to teach Abraham a lesson, makes him go to a top mountain believing that he's going to have to sacrifice his son.
Yes, as a means, yes.
That doesn't. That's what I would say is evil. Like I mean, could you imagine another context in which another human being could do that to another human being, and that would not seem evil?
Well, I mean, it depends. Is there a morally justified reason? I just presented one, and you're free to not accept it.
Yeah, but you would believe any action by God, doesn't matter what it is in the Bible, is morally justified.
No. Okay, my contention here, Skylar, is that just like J.R. Tolkien can author a book, he doesn't have to approve of all the moral actions in his story. They could be necessary evils to a higher end, which would even, I think, fit
necessary.
Your model of morality or ethics, right?
Well,
and it would actually fit all theirs too.
But if he's telling somebody to do something that is immoral, he's ordering an immoral action.
Now, is that immoral for that society?
Are morals relative to a society, or are we basing morals on God's moral character?
I'm not going to argue morality. I'm taking your own morality. Okay.
Well, you're asking
for their society that wasn't
of God, and you're asking me about. Well,
right, guys, do me a favor. The only thing that I ask is that don't talk over each other, because the people in the audience, it just sounds like a bunch of garbled mess. So just let people finish their sentence, and we'll give you as much time as this conversation needs. Just try to respect that. Okay,
go ahead, Skylar. You were saying something?
So what I'm saying is, like, you're saying you don't want to talk morality, but we're talking about God's morality. We're talking about evil, and we're talking about the context of what he's doing. So, so if you're saying that, like, he's ordering people to do actions that would seem immoral, unless they're just not immoral under the Christian worldview, it seems like we have quite a bit of a problem here. Like slavery was a great example. Like, he's telling people that you can own child slaves and human slaves. You can treat them with rigor, pass them on permanent inheritance. Is slavery not immoral?
Well, right. This is the reason I'm asking about the social context here, is because if you look at the neighboring codes that are talking about these sorts of things, they are far worse. So when I said in my introduction that God accommodates these people where they are and moves them further forward, this is the mode that they would do it. Sort of like Genesis 1 being a polemic against ancient cosmology and gods. But I can give you examples of this from the Hammurabi Code, from the Middle Assyrian texts. In other words, those things weren't intended to change our culture. They were intended to change their culture. Does that make sense?
No, I get it. But the problem is with that argument is there are certain things he just completely banned. He could have chose to ban those things. Like, especially if you hold on. I'm finishing my statement, please. I'd like to finish my statement. So here's the thing, is God didn't have to do that. He could have done it any way he wants. He could have banned slavery. He could have gave women equal rights. He could have not had them treated as property. He could have not ordered people to commit mass genocide, things like that. Now, when you bring up other cultures as if like that's that's not really an argument. You're just saying, oh, well, these other cultures are worse. Well, I don't really care if they're worse. I'm talking about the stuff that God ordained and ordered. Gotcha. These are his laws. This is how he told these people to run a society. So I'm not interested in what another culture did. I'm interested in the culture in which God told them how they could live, what they should do, and the things that they actually did because of him. Go ahead.
Right. And remember, my thesis was God did predestinate all of these things. They're all foreordained, and he uses the means as well as the ends. What I'm trying to point out is that Christians who are very sloppy, that when they say they're going to ground God's moral character in his nature, they don't make a distinction between the non-essential attributes of God and the essential attributes of God. And since God has entered into a covenant with humanity from the scriptural perspective, I mean, even Genesis 1 is a covenant. It's the Edenic covenant. You can read about it in Hosea 6. The moment he did that, he just accommodates us and moves it forward. But I mean, I could show you examples of this. I'm not just trying to say that they're just trying to water. I'm saying that those laws weren't intended to be universal laws at all. They were meant to be particular laws for a particular time that would serve a greater purpose in the future. For example, here's Hammurabi Law 280. If while in a foreign country a man buy a male or female slave belonging to another of his own country, if when he returns home the owner of the male or female slave recognizes it, if the male or female slave be a native of the country, he shall give them back without any money. Now, this is because they actually had to pay more than you might say, like the dowry or whatever, for example, in the scriptural passages. In Code 281, it says, if they are from another country, the buyer shall declare the amount of money paid, therefore, to the merchant and keep the male or female slave. So, like, for example, what this would be doing is be trying to correct their current cultural moral code. But I think the difference that maybe you're not seeing in what I'm trying to say, Skylar, is that I take an accommodationist approach. These laws, I grant you, are all for a particular time, for a particular purpose. And you're saying it could have been done another way, namely, let it be done the way that I say it be done, rather, and if you extend the same right to the covenant God, it seems to make sense to me.
Well, what I would say first is God chose to do that covenant. He could have chose any kind of means he wanted. He could have made a whole different kind of covenant. So he chose that. He already, like you said he preordained all this, already planned everything out. So he preordained that instead of banning child slavery, he ordained child slavery. Any kind of disease that exists in the world, he preordained. He chose for it to be in existence. Mental retardation, mental handicap, all of it, all preordained and destined by God because God wanted it this way. He could have made it to where there are no repercussions for human beings not worshiping him or choosing not to obey him, but he chose an eternal hell. And once again, like you bringing up other cultures, like what the Code of Hammurabi is irrelevant. It doesn't matter. Like God chose to make these, like even if they're not universal for everybody now, he still made these rules. If a man molests children 20 years ago and he stopped molesting children, he still molested them in the first place. So with all these examples that I've given you, these are things that we would describe as evil. Now, as a Christian, if you don't want to describe them as evil, that's fine. You don't have to. I think you do believe that they're evil. But the fact is, God ordered these evil things. I mean, there's tons of examples in the Bible. I mean, look what he did to Abraham. Look what he did to Job. Look, I mean, he killed David's baby, made a baby suffer for 7 days because of what the father did. Maybe he had no responsibility in what his father did by cheating and these other awful things David did. But what does he do? He makes a baby sick and makes the baby suffer for 7 days, and somehow that's righteous. None of these words seem to apply or make any sense within the kind of biblical context we're having in this conversation.
Fully.
Yeah, so I guess what I would say that is that what you're doing is you're imposing modern individualistic Western European ideas onto the text, which is the opposite of the historical grammatical method. It's the same mistake that young earthers make when they try to argue for a flat earth after they come out of young earth creationism in Genesis 1, when it's not even talking about that. It's like criticizing something for not being what it was in the first place, which makes no sense, Skylar.
I'm sorry, was I incorrect? Did he kill David's baby by making it sick for 7 days?
Yeah, that doesn't mean he morally approved of it.
Well, he did it. He's the one who made the baby sick.
Yeah.
So so he just does things that he doesn't morally approve of?
Well, that doesn't mean he doesn't morally disapprove of it. That's the point. Are you going to say J.R.R.
What is it? Does he morally approve or disapprove of it?
In his, I would say in his non-essential nature. That's why I make the distinction of God's nature.
What does that mean? What's a non-essential nature mean? I don't understand what that means.
Yeah, it just means something is, there's a particular attribute of something that is contingent, that could have been otherwise, whereas something else is necessary to define whatever it is.
Okay, so he didn't have to do it, but he chose to do it, is all you're saying to me. Is like he didn't have to do it, but he chose.
Well, yeah, I'm saying he didn't logically have to do it.
Oh, exactly.
It also doesn't logically entail that J.R.R. Tolkien approves of all of his creative.
The difference is one is fiction. One is fiction. The other is you actually believe it happened.
Well, in your view, it is fiction. So this is applicable, right?
No, but I'm going by your worldview, Soli. I'm stepping into the Christian worldview. I'm obviously going to see what you believe.
And I'm asking.
So do you not? Okay. So he didn't have to do it. That's correct. He chose to do it. He didn't have to do it. He purposely made a baby sick to make David suffer.
Well, maybe that's the only possibility. That's another possible world in modal logic too, right?
Now you're just contradicting yourself. Now you're saying he maybe had to do it when you just a second ago you used the example that this was something he didn't have to do.
No, I said it's logically possible. That's what I meant.
Okay, so why would he have to make a baby sick?
That there's a morally sufficient reason for all of these actions recorded in the Bible too, Skylar. You have to keep that in mind.
Just give me a morally sufficient reason why you would make a baby sick for 7 days.
I don't need to.
You don't.
Why do I have to?
I'm just asking you. That's the question.
Negative?
No, I'm asking you to tell me why it would be morally sufficient.
My
baby for 7 days.
Right. My thesis is that we can't know that morally sufficient reason as per Genesis 3, right? So you don't knowledge of good and evil, eating that.
If you don't know, it's fine. If you don't know the answer to that
that's
question.
That's what I'm telling you. I'm saying I'm not just saying I don't know. I'm saying we can't know. That's the biblical evidence. But I trust that God does all things good. He has a morally justified reason based on other things.
Exactly. And this is exactly what I was talking about in my opening statement, is you're just going, and every theist does this. They just define God as good. Doesn't matter what his actions are. You're just going to trust that it's good. I mean, he could literally take 100 babies, throw them into a pit of sharks, and you would have the same answer.
No, I wouldn't.
Why? What's the difference?
What's the difference between your example?
Yeah. Why would it? What's different?
Right. What we're arguing about is God's attribute, not my preference. That's an ad hominem, right?
That's all right. I'm going to repeat it again. So, what's the difference between God making one baby sick and making it die for 7 days for punishing the sins of the father, and then punishing 100 fathers because of their sin by making them all these babies being thrown into a pit of sharks?
Right.
There's no logical difference there.
No. What I'm saying is there's a logical possibility, right?
That it would be morally sufficient for God to do so.
I mean, you're saying it's logically possible that it could have been some other way. God could have done it this way or that way. It's the same thing.
Sure. Like if you don't know, it's fine. You're just basically saying, well, it could be morally sufficient, but you don't know. So it's not, I can't do anything with that.
Right. I
Okay.
agree with you.
So, all right, that's fine. So I'm just pointing out that to most people that would seem evil. You can disagree with that. That's absolutely fine.
Right.
But this is classic Christian theology here. I mean, you don't find any problem with God preordaining people.
No, I didn't say that.
Well, let me ask you. Well, no, I'm not. I'm talking about morally from a God's perspective. It's not immoral for God to preordain people to hell.
To hell?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we could talk about that too. That's interesting. I think evil is objectively and always universally wrong. And in Nahum 1:3, God says he will not acquit the guilty. So there's a morally sufficient answer, at least from the biblical perspective, why these people will remain evil, like it says in Revelation 22:11.
Because God made them that way.
That's right.
So God made people evil. So hold on, let's flesh that out. Let's hold on. Yeah. So let's flesh that out for the audience to let them know what you just said. So audience, what he just said was that God makes them this way. He makes them evil. And then because of the way that he made them, he makes them suffer an eternal hell for all eternity. Is that correct?
That's correct. The alternative is biochemical predestination. Are you a behaviorist?
So what? I listen, whatever.
Maybe there's a breeding defect
that may be true. Let me even say that. Let's just grant you that might be true. But we're talking about whether God is evil right now. And the alternative, no matter how sad it might be, if there's no God, doesn't take away from the fact that your God makes people evil and then punishes them for the way that he made them.
Oh, I agree with you. If they are evil, they deserve to be punished.
But he made them evil.
Skylar, if we brought a pedophile in this room to you right now, right? A known pedophile. We know the guy's a pedophile, and I told you you should not do anything to that person, but because you should love him. Would you hate that person?
Would I hate them?
Yes.
If they were suffering from a sickness to where like they're really trying to change and they've committed those acts, like as a human being, I should try to love them. It doesn't mean I love what they do or support in any way what they do. And it certainly is a crime that they should be put in prison for. But that's a whole different type of scenario because guess what? I'm not making them a pedophile. Your God makes human beings pedophiles. And because of that, they rape children, the people that your God supposedly loves. So does God make pedophiles for the purpose of raping children?
Well, I would have to first ask you about your definition of love. There are 4 different Greek words for love in the Bible, and there's one Greek word, right? Or one Hebrew word for love in the Bible. Have you read, for example, D.A. Carson's book, The Difficult Doctrine of God's Love?
No.
Okay. So when I'm making this distinction, I'm referring to God's goodness and his essential natures he had before creation. And you're just appealing to the ones what I would categorize as non-essential properties of God that are post-creation.
So is that yes, God makes pedophiles to rape children?
Yes. But
you don't find that evil,
right? Well, no, I'm not saying that I approve of that, and I'm also saying that J.R. Tolkien can write a whole story.
It's fiction. That's fiction. Right. It's not real.
But you believe this is fiction.
No, but we're talking about your worldview. We're talking about the Christian God. You believe that it's real. So you believe God made pedophiles to rape children, and you think that doesn't make him evil.
No, I'm not saying I don't think. See that think
so is he evil for doing that? So is he evil? I'll ask you the question in a different way.
Ask me straightforward.
Is he evil for making pedophiles so that they could rape children?
Not if there's a morally sufficient reason.
Okay, that's fine. I can't. If that's the way you feel, it's the way you feel.
The God of the Bible. Look, you know Romans 9, right? God of the Bible doesn't owe us any answers.
I know that's how you feel. I just don't. Luckily, this is why I'm not. Well, it doesn't even matter because even if there was a God, I wouldn't worship him. You choose to still worship this God who makes pedophiles to rape children, right?
Yes,
I choose not to because I wouldn't worship a God on that level. I don't care what he does.
Oh, right. I understand that. That's because you're not a Christian. I understand.
Yeah, of course. I'm not a Christian. That's why. But I wouldn't, even if, like I said, even if I knew he existed on that level, I would no longer worship him because of that.
Got you.
Like, and listen, like if you wanted to say, like, this is what I was talking about. Like, all you're gonna do is keep defining God as good, and no matter what, it doesn't matter. He can make pedophiles to rape children. Still totally cool. He's a good God for that, right? That's just one example.
No, Skylar, the mediating premise is because something is recorded in Scripture, that God apparently should disapprove of, therefore he doesn't disapprove of it. That's the mediating premise of your argument. That's your assumption. I'm telling you, like J.R.R. Tolkien.
Assuming anything. I'm just asking you a question.
Right?
You keep going back to a fictional author, not a fictional author.
Yeah, he is a fiction according to you.
A person who writes fictional material and then trying to compare it to a real God that you believe in.
No, it's meant to illustrate analogically, right? Like I explained earlier, how you can have a separate category of causation that removes complicit guilt in that way.
Sure, you can try to define God as not being guilty by. I mean, you already admit that he does all this.
Okay,
I mean,
go ahead.
You've already admitted it now. So God makes. You can name anything. God makes people who want to mutilate children, want to execute. Like he made Hitler in order so that 7 million Jews would die.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned that because some of these Old Testament passages are actually trying to soften the laws of the pagan ancient Near Eastern cultures to make it down to payment rather than mutilating each other.
Yeah. But he did make Hitler in order to kill 7 million Jews.
Yeah, that was a means to an end. It probably has a morally justified reason, I would guess.
Okay. Yeah, but not evil, huh? God's still not evil?
No, God's not. He's not evil.
Okay, that's fine. Listen, I'm just saying, like, your definition of evil is just very strange to me. Ooh. And you can have your own definition. That's absolutely fair and fine. I just disagree with it.
I know.
Okay, so let's switch gears,
please,
quick, and let's talk about the predeterminism.
Sure. Yeah. So let's talk about why does God choose human beings to go to eternal hell before they're even born?
Well, I would say because he genuinely always will hate evil, and he will punish people that way. So because evil is actually, objectively, universally, and always wrong, on my view, right? Then God must continue to punish those people.
Unless God does it, then it's not morally wrong.
No, we would refer to that as righteous indignation. For example, in Psalm 11:5, Psalm 5:5, you probably know about these verses. They talk about God hating people, and they're in the context of righteous judgment.
Yeah,
we would call it righteous indignation.
Hold on one second, Skylar. Let him.
I'm just. Well, I was done. All I was saying is that I would just call that righteous indignation in the same way I tried to use the pedophile example. Apparently, you wouldn't punish that person, that pedophile. You'd let him go.
Well, you just bared false witness right there, because that was one of the first things I said is we should put him in jail and put him in prison. So that's
okay. Yes. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So secondly,
so you would punish the person, not just.
I would, for their actions. But the problem with, and the difference, right, is like under my scenario, that person can make choices. Under your scenario, God makes them do it. And this is what's so funny to me, is that you're making an argument that God makes them evil and then punishes them for the way that he made them. It'd be like literally me programming my computer to turn off every 10 seconds and then punishing my computer for turning off every 10 seconds. Like it makes no sense whatsoever. And why would this morally perfect being, right, make a creature that is opposed to his own very nature? So God, this morally perfect thing, this entity, right, makes people do things that are against his own nature and then punishes them for the way he made them. Like, I don't know how you could think this makes any sense at all.
Yeah, sure. Indeterminism makes all of your thoughts accidents, right? So you couldn't be held morally responsible on a libertarian free will model either, which your system I don't think supports. I think you would be a biochemical predestinarian, which would mean all your thoughts and decisions are just predestined as well, right?
I don't know, to be honest with you, and I don't know if I hold that position.
So I would have to know what you mean by the ability to.
What I would say is human beings can make choices, and they weren't made. Human beings, I don't believe human beings were. The difference is human beings make choices. What you're arguing with God is God forces human beings to commit atrocious acts like child rape, and then punishes them for the very acts that God forces them to make.
No, that's not actually what my position is. That's not what I was arguing.
He doesn't force them to do those actions.
Yeah, the same kind of causality in J.R.R. Tolkien's book upon his created realm, right?
Fictional book,
doesn't logically entail that he holds that he has to hold to that moral approval of whatever is in that book. That's the issue.
Okay.
Plus, I make a distinction between God's natures as non-essential. You know, in his nature, two properties, essential properties and non-essential ones. So it won't do to say he contradicted his own nature. Well, which nature?
Apparently, he's got a bunch, according to you. I don't know which nature you're even referring to at this point. Apparently he doesn't find it. It's so out of. I'm lost for words, to be honest with you, because you have some kind of rationale that says that it's okay for him to make people in an awful, terrible way and then punish them for the way that he made them. That's all you're arguing. Everything comes down to that, and you don't even disagree with that. And you already acknowledged that he made Hitler to kill 7 million Jews. He made pedophiles to rape children, and somehow that's morally just. And then you keep using this weird analogy about J.R. Tolkien as if like a fictional stories written by an author equate to God and somehow, and it just simply doesn't.
I think we're going to move on to some questions here. I think because I think it's kind of gotten to the point where maybe you guys are talking past each other a little bit, so maybe we can kind of help clarify a little bit here and get some questions from the audience and some of my own questions. Because okay, so let me ask you, Soli. You're trying to say that something along the lines of J.R. Tolkien, which if you want to make fictional true statements, something to be evaluated, that's fine. But do you not agree that characters in The Lord of the Rings or whatever novel you want to put forth, those are not agents of moral concern? They're not real agents. They're not people. Skylar's a real person. People in the Bible, supposedly, as you believe it, were real people. These were real things, real atrocities. People really died in the Holocaust. So those are objects of moral concern. They're moral agents. Would you agree?
Yeah, I would agree with you. And the point, Steve, was that I'm positing a different kind of causation that's different metaphysically. That's all the illustration is meant to
okay, so
dots on.
So you're agreeing there's a false equivocation there between your analogy between these fictitious characters and real moral agents. And I think going back to when Skylar had asked you about predestination, right? You're not a libertarian then, correct? You don't agree with libertarian free will, obviously.
No, right? No. For example, I'll tell you why real quick. It only takes 2 seconds.
Sure.
Because the Bible depicts the ending and the beginning as creatures created without libertarian free will in good circumstances.
Okay.
That's why I don't buy this free will defense bullcrap, and I also don't buy the atheist perspective.
Well, you can have free will and not be libertarian.
Okay, go ahead, though.
You can be compatibilist, right? There's some degrees of determination and some degrees of having choice in the determinants, right? So the way they look at it is if you went back and rewind the tape, supposedly, would you make the same choices? Or are you determined to make the same choices, or is it a true libertarian free will such that you might make a different choice? Right, it's indeterminate.
Right,
libertarian free will is
say it that way. It's contingent all the time. Yeah.
Okay, so if Skylar's asking you about predeterminacy of a agent that is not even existent yet, how is that a moral? What was I think the term you used? I'm trying to think of I don't want to misquote you.
Morally sufficient or something?
Morally sufficient reason, yeah. And by the way, there are people that use that morally sufficient reason. I believe Bantinger uses that term for his theodicy on the evidential problem of evil. But why would you say that is a morally sufficient reason for a God to send somebody to hell before they've even done anything wrong? God could have changed the path of that person. God could have made it a different possible world where one less evil existed, one less atrocity existed. Could he not?
Right. The thing about that is, I know that seems arbitrary. I know what you're getting at, but the same arbitrariness could be applied. Why couldn't he just create a world where we're all in hell to begin with? Why not play that game till the cows come home, you know?
Well, I think Scott, let me ask you then.
Yeah.
Your argument is such that God created this world, right? An internal critique. We're doing internal critique, and I think that Scott has made that clear, very clear, because we have to treat these things, even if it's fictitious, as something that could be true. Okay, so this possible world that existed, is your argument is God created this one? Is it because he necessarily had to create this one, or is it contingent he had to do this one, or do you think that God could have made other possible worlds in some other possible world where there was some less atrocity, some less evil, making God not an evil God?
Absolutely. Like he could have easily made I mean, look at disease and suffering, like in that sense, from diseases. He didn't have to make any of these diseases. He chose to. I mean, you look at like throughout the human existence of the world and history, like, we're finally at this day and age having modern medication where we can cure a lot of things. But man, I mean, there was a point in time you broke your leg, you're fucked. Like that was it. Like you're whether it be you can't hunt or you can't do anything to get your food or you're kicked out by your tribe. Then you think about all this stuff just not having like penicillin, right? And but the key of this story, like you got to understand what Soli's position is that God ordained this. Like it isn't just that these things came somehow through sin coming in the world. Like he planned it this way. He planned all the atrocities that I argued earlier and made people do them because there is no free will according to Soli. So it's basically like, hey, whatever atrocity you want to listen. I've been very harsh. I've used very extreme examples just to get to the point with this. And he just chooses not to. And all the Christian's going to be able to do here is just say morally sufficient reasons. God is good. God is righteous. Right. And then those words, when we say good, righteous, moral, they don't have any connection with how we as human beings live and what we would call as good, moral, or any of that kind of stuff.
Okay, well, Soli, so following up on that, do you think that God had to create this particular world out of necessity, or was it contingent upon his reasoning for whatever reason he had?
No, I think it was a completely free will choice by God to create and to condescend and to enter into covenant and take upon these attributes ad extra.
Okay, so you agree with Skylar that he could have created a better world then? Prior to the decree, of course, yeah, because I hold to God had a decree, absolutely.
So why? So why would you do it? So why would you let's just take something like a disease. So why would you put disease in the world?
Right, but again, I mean, I think the same arbitrariness could be applied. Why couldn't God create a world where evil was good? I can
well, then it would be a contradiction calling evil good because
then he probably didn't make that possible world, right?
So, but can you answer my question though? So why disease?
Well, I don't know. I'm just saying he probably has a morally sufficient reason, and my thesis is that I don't know, and the Bible tells me I can't know that sort of a thing.
But do you agree that free will doesn't get you out of the natural evils, right?
I think free will is worthless. Even though being a Calvinist, my confession holds to a compatibilist scheme of it. I think it just confuses matters, and it actually destroys moral responsibility altogether.
Do you believe in eternal torture, hell? Like, do you believe in eternal suffering?
I know what the luck objection is. For free will.
So, do you believe in eternal hell, torture, like eternal pain, suffering?
Yes, I do. I'm not sure if the fire is literal, but
no, but you believe people will suffer. So, so why would you? Well, I guess with that, I almost have a follow-up question, but like, why would he make people just to suffer in that torture?
Well, I think that it would display his property of justice. I mean, that's the way I view it, because I take all of these attributes together, Skylar, not just one of them. My problem is sort of like yours, where people.
Yeah. Why is that just?
Right.
Yeah. Why would that be just to take somebody, decide before they're born to throw them in hell for eternity?
Well, I'm not saying that would be just. I'm saying that would be a possible justifying reason for why he does it in that way.
So you don't. This is another one you don't know. You're just saying it could be just to show.
Yeah,
you were articulating that it was to show his justice a second ago. So now I'm a little confused. Now you're saying it's not because of that?
Say that again. I'm sorry.
So you were just saying that it could be to show his justice, that his just, and you were saying how you're talking about looking at, not just one aspect, some characteristic of it. So I was asking you why he chooses just to throw people in hell before they're even born. And then you're saying, well, it could be because he's trying to show his justice. And I'm trying to understand why that would be justice.
You're still muted. Maybe you had to go sit with the dog.
Bully?
I mean, this is just, we'll wait. There he is.
I'm sorry, what?
All right, so what I was asking, just to repeat again, all right? I originally asked you, why does God choose to send people to hell before they're even born? and then it's eternal suffer, right? And then you basically said, well, because it could be to show his justice, this other attribute of it. And I'm trying to understand why it would be just to damn someone to hell before they're born and then make them suffer. So how is that justice?
Well, there's a lot there to unwind, but basically I would say that just like the other objections, because we want to appeal to hypothetical possible worlds all over the place, I could say that it's possible in this world that we could make the same complaint, right, against people getting saved. Why did God choose people before the foundation of the world?
It's kind of avoiding my question there. So
no, it's not. No, it's not.
Saying,
I'm saying because it's
saying these words are all arbitrary. They don't mean anything. Then
not at all.
Nothing, bad means nothing. Well, I mean, that's what you're arguing. Now you're saying that, like, basically, why didn't he just make everybody go to hell?
Right. If you're going to play the hypothetical game.
Well, I'm just like, do you have an answer or not? If you don't have an answer, just say, I don't know.
No, ultimately, I don't know.
Is there a biblical answer for it? Is there anywhere in the Bible why it describes?
Yeah, let him answer.
Sure.
Yeah, ultimately, I don't know. But I'm giving you hypotheticals, just like you're giving me hypotheticals, which is,
well, no, that's not
my perspective is meaningful as talking about green cheese on the moon and then trying to prove a universal negative.
No, it wasn't a hypothetical. That was what you described your God is doing. Does God choose to send people to hell before they're even born?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not a hypothetical.
He also chooses people to be saved before he was born. Why don't we take both sides? Both sides.
That's fine. That's fine. So not a hypothetical there.
No.
Okay, so why does he do that biblically?
Why would he do that? Because he's a covenant God. Covenants contain curses and blessings.
Okay, and he chose that covenant, right? Because he chose.
Yeah,
so why would he choose that covenant to do curses and blessings?
Because he condescended and took upon himself non-essential attributes the moment he created the world.
Yeah, this is going a little circular here. We're going to take some questions here, but before I do on that, maybe the better way to phrase it so we can wrap up that thread. Why did God choose the individuals that he determined to go to heaven or hell before they were even born? What was his decision-making process? They've done nothing wrong.
Yeah. From the Calvinist perspective, it's unconditional election, right? That he didn't choose them based on some merit. And that seems to be what's required by grace, because grace can't be demanded.
I don't know
so basically, there's no reason.
Yeah, no
reason.
Because God wanted to. Okay, so that goes in the
it's because God wanted to. Ultimately.
Okay, this goes. That's great, because it goes right into the next question, which is from the audience, and we're going to be taking some more questions there. Tyler asks, can you ask your theist guest if there's any action that cannot be justified as moral by having a morally sufficient reason?
Yeah, I think I would posit, one that we all hear a lot. I think torturing innocent babies for fun, with the intention of doing that.
How would you know that's not God's will?
How would I know that that's not God's will?
But it is God's will.
Right.
That's the thing is God wants babies to be tortured.
Right.
So for fun.
Yeah.
I understand.
It could be for fun too. There's no difference. That's the point. It's like we've already used the example with the pedophile earlier, right? He made those pedophiles to rape children. So when somebody,
it's not the same thing.
It is, because if someone enjoys raping children, and God predetermined his actions ahead of time,
right?
Then the enjoyment and the raping of the child goes with that.
All right, let's let Soli, let's let him answer that.
Okay. Yeah, I was just going to say that doesn't seem to follow at all. I mean, just saying. I mean, that's like saying because somebody decided to have a child who went out and slaughtered a bunch of people, we shouldn't have that child in the first place, or it's worthless. Right.
I think the way the question is worded is that anybody can say this is God's will. God made me to torture babies for fun. Therefore, it is God's will, and anything can be said at that point be covered under a morally sufficient reason. I think that's the way the question is being presented.
I got you. Okay, so some clarity here. We in the Reformed camp we make a distinction between God's prescriptive will, his ordained will, what he ordains to actually occur. And I think the other one is prescient will. I think there's a few different ways they sort of cash it out, but it wouldn't necessarily be a contradiction even there, because we could appeal to, like, for example, Skylar willing to have a child, or Skylar willing to have a child, but he doesn't approve of all of the child's actions. And so he would have a separate facet of his will that would include moral prescriptions and things. Does that make sense?
Not really. But
but
I'll leave that to the honest to decide.
Okay.
Well, is there any action a human takes that wasn't part of God's plan?
Yeah, I would say none of them. They're all part of God's plan. That's what Ephesians 1:5-11 says in Isaiah. Yeah.
So exactly, anything that's ever happened in human existence is because God planned it this way.
Right.
I like how I do like how you combined Skylar and my name, though.
I did, didn't I?
Yeah.
And just like you look at this, what was the woman from Austria? I think it was Austria, where the woman was kept basically she was kidnapped when she was young. No, she wasn't kidnapped. It was the guy's daughter who basically had her, kept her in a basement, raped her over and over again, had multiple children with her. Some of those children died. Some of those children lived. All part of God's plan. This is the way he planned it out. And somehow this isn't evil to somebody. It's absolutely mind-blowing. Like,
well, tell me why you're not a biochemical predestinarian and behaviorist. Why not?
What does that have to do with the point that I just made? Like, it's a non sequitur. There you go, show. But what you're doing is you're just trying to divert the attention away from the actual issue, because our topic tonight, right, is God evil?
Right.
Right. We're not talking about free will here, having to have a discussion with free will. Right. And I'll be honest, I'm not studied up enough on this free will conversation.
Okay.
But you're asking me to give you a proper answer. But what I'd love to, like I said, I want to stick to the topic, which is God evil? And you're just basically saying everything that ever happened was planned by God. So I don't know how you can't define that as evil.
Do you think J.R. Tolkien was evil?
See, we're gonna. Isn't this a logical fallacy, though? Isn't this what Steve pointed out? Like, this is a
no, I just don't think. I think we're just talking past one another because I have nuances in my view, and you have nuances in what you're saying.
Well, I'm not saying anything that's factually incorrect. Like, besides the fact that it's my opinion. I don't know why you'd find this morally good, but like, it's a fact that God did all these things according to your worldview.
Yeah, God and man. Remember, I'm positing a different kind of causation similar to J.R. Tolkien and his characters in his created world.
But all causation is caused by God.
Yeah, again, you're
you're
conflating the fact that we are agents of moral concern, and by using that reference to J.R. Tolkien, you're talking about fictitious characters that we have no moral obligations to. And this is an argument that I've actually got into recently on my channel. Look at, if you do not have an actual moral agent, we are moral agents. We're humans. By definition, morality don't exist because we are moral agents. If humans didn't exist, there would be no morality. You agree, right?
Oh yeah, I agree with you there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So if things like dreams are morally inert, things like video games, they're morally inert. You have no moral obligation to a non-playing character. You just don't. Same thing what he's saying here. In a fictitious world like the Lord of the Rings, those characters are not things that you need to be morally concerned about. We are, and he's arguing that because of that, it is immoral for God to claim it's just to send somebody for hell predestined to do it. That's not a moral act that Skylar is attributing to that deity. He's saying that deity is immoral by doing that act. And I don't think you've actually addressed why it's not an immoral act. Saying it's just a morally sufficient reason does not get you out of explaining why that's not a morally immoral act.
I got you. I understand what you're saying. Remember, the Tolkien issue was to address different kinds of causations that creatures have and that God has. That's the point. If you remove the metaphysical category of causation there that most people take as a domino effect sort of predetermination universe, usually, then what you're saying is absolutely correct.
Okay, well, first, Lisa Thea said I was correct for the first time. Anyways, we're going to wrap this up. I know we unfortunately had another show earlier. We are going to have an after show, I think, later tonight on this. Skylar, you can go on if you want to, but I think you've kind of made your argument on this.
No, I think that's it. I would just, I guess I had one more question. If I could ask one more question. What makes, because I'm getting like, it's basically just intentions is what it sounds like. Whatever the intention is, what makes something moral or immoral, basically under this. Like, is it the action or is it the intention that makes something right or wrong, moral or immoral? I see you, Soli. You're muted.
Was that question for me, Skylar?
Yes. So,
my view, I hold to something akin to semi-compatibilism, and something similar to what I guess what I would call Christian egoism. And so I would say that it's the intention in the action, not the ability to do otherwise in the action itself, is where I personally think moral responsibility lies. And so I would have even a weaker version of principle of our alternative possibilities there.
Would you say it's immoral to intentionally harm a child?
Well, it depends on your intention. That's the
What if
difference, I think.
okay,
right? Like I could lie to somebody with a
sin.
bad intention, or I could lie to somebody with a good intention, right?
We'll say to punish the father for his sin. Is it immoral to hurt a child to punish the father for their sin?
Not in their culture. Again, I think this is
not culture. Your God's morality. I'm not asking about moral relativism in their culture. We're talking about God,
right?
Okay, which your morals are based off.
Well, yeah, I'm saying that our morals are based on God's essential characteristics, not his non-essential ones. After creation, everything that happens would be tied in those ones. I was going to say something else, but I think that's pretty much it.
Yeah, I'm good, Steve. You're good.
All right. Well, we're going to wrap this up. Like I said, I think I am going to have an after show on this particular topic because I actually like this topic.
You're both invited.
Absolutely.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love to come in.
Many people from the live chat as well. I'm just going to wrap this up. I do have a shout out to the live feed that I'm going to put out there. If you guys want to watch some funny videos, they're not safe for work, so don't watch them at work. But if you just want to watch some funny stuff, a guy named Dice Slow, his link in the live chat, and it's DYESOLO with a apostrophe they got on it.
Doesn't it star a familiar character named P-Man?
Something along those lines. I don't remember the exact names of these people any longer.
D-Man.
Something. It's a letter and men or man or something. I don't recall.
D-Man.
Who remembers this stuff? You know.
Don't say G-Man. That was too close to G-Man.
Oh.
Yeah, maybe. I don't remember that.
Could be that. That sounds like it.
Could be. Right. You know what? All I say is go check out Dice Slow's shit. Go check it out. It's funny. Give him some subs. Give him some likes. Watch all. He only has like 5 videos. They're about 3 minutes each. So watch them all. Like them all. Sub.
They're funny. Okay. And now we're gonna go back to you guys to, if you have anything to wrap up with, or once again let everybody know where they can find you. If you've got anything coming up, I know Skylar's got the definition of a character.
Hopefully,
actually a caricature. That would be more appropriate. But we'll start with you, Skylar. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I just thought, this was great getting to do this, Soli. I appreciate you coming on and having this conversation. I know it's not easy. It's tough, especially having to talk about some of the atrocities that happen in the Bible. It doesn't make people feel comfortable. But I'm always here to bring awareness to all those out there about what the Bible teaches. And yeah, I'm just happy, guys. I'm just happy to be on the show. I can't even speak. You've been working all day. But if you want to check some of my other stuff out, Skylar Fiction, just go to YouTube, subscribe, make the world a better place, all that fun stuff. So I appreciate it, guys.
Highly recommended. Highly recommended. And congrats, by the way, on reclaiming your channel. That was a good victory.
Yeah, no, it was amazing. And thank you to just everybody out there, especially you two guys, really supported me. And it was if it wasn't for everybody out there and just support, I don't think my channel would be back up. So thank you.
And Soli Deo Gloria, you get the final say.
All right, so now I can proselytize. No, I'm just kidding. Steve McCrae's like, I read that, Fred. Thank you guys for having me on here. It was great discussion with you, Skylar. If you want to talk about any of these things anymore, maybe again sometime later on your show, I'd be happy. Thank you guys.
Well, thank you. It's good, and it's good to actually see you. I think I do remember this name before. Obviously, I think you've used it before, but it's good seeing you again one way.
And you're both again invited to the after show. We'll give you the links to that so you can come in, and it's a good opportunity for people who are watching that want to come in and ask questions to you guys and maybe dig a little bit deeper into what you feel. So that will do it for tonight. Steve, any last words?
I'm just gonna, I feel guilty. I got to read out these last 3 super chats if I can.
Oh yeah.
Steve, I feel guilty about something too, real quick.
Yeah.
I remember before we started, I said I was going to make it clear that Skylar wasn't assuming the Christian God or whatever, that he actually believed that he exists. And my apologies, Skylar, for not doing that.
No, it's fine. No, I think everybody got the picture.
You're fine.
No, it's fine.
Right.
Absolutely.
All right. So KBO says, if an animal, doesn't matter what species, kills a innocent human, since animals don't have a freedom of will, is God guilty for that act? We can discuss
absolutely
on my channel. Well, according to Soli, obviously that'd be the case. Fostering Atheism says, when is it ever acceptable to own another human being? If you say, when God says so, you're a piece of shit. And I won't, I kind of agree with the sentiment, but yeah, I don't personally, it is never okay to own another human being. Never. I don't think that it's ever justified, my personal opinion. Anybody else?
I share your opinion.
You're a very moral person, Skylar.
Well, I try.
For a moral anti-realist, you're a moral. Okay,
it's very true.
Fostering Atheism says, what moral reason is there to rape a child? None. Simple as that.
I believe we all agree.
Jay Paddock says, actually, I really like the fact he keeps bringing up Tolkien, because we can simply dismiss the Bible as fictitious story with no authority. I don't know if that's really a fair thing. I mean, I understand that why he's trying to use that as fictitious truth statements, because he's trying to do an external critique. Skylar's trying to do internal, I think, or vice versa. And Skylar's recognizing that we're treating these things as if they're true, right? So, anyways, that's the super chats, and we thank you all for them very much.
And one thing, this is a technical thing, but Dave, I forgot to remind you about the close scene. I don't know if you had that queued up, that image. Sorry, that was a little technical thing, but Skylar, I'm going to let you actually close us out, because this may be the only discussion that I have seen you in where you did not use your signature phrase. So I would like for you now to tell us all what we can go and eat so that we can sign off with pleasure.
Well, guys, it's been really fun tonight. I appreciate all of you. Subscribe, make the world a better place, and also eat a big bag of dicks, everybody. Thank you.
Excellent.